Here, though, you're going to see the media rising in defense of John Bolton for no reason other than the fact that he is a critic of Donald Trump. And like I said, that is enough and nothing else. Warped mind John Bolton has. He was envisioning Edward Snowden being hanged so continuously, so intensively, that he even conjured up the kind of tree by which he wanted them hanged. And in the case of Julian Assange, he said he should be in prison for 176 years. That's why I say this is the sweetest karmic justice.
Glenn Greenwald praised the recent indictment of John Bolton, calling it karmic justice. John Bolton, the war provocateur, war criminal, never saw a war he didn't support, ironically indicted and will be charged for mishandling classified information, the same kind of offense that he said that Snowden should hang over and Julian Assange should receive over 100 years in jail for. Let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
It isn't just that he recklessly handled classified information. It's not just that he sent classified information on purpose, top secret information, to people not authorized to receive it. It's that his reckless mishandling of classified information, his illegal mishandling of classified information, resulted in the acquisition of that information by intelligence agencies and hackers associated with Iran. Now, I personally would not consider this case to be all that serious, but I just want it to be clear that John Bolton has looked at cases like this, and even cases more mild, and said, people who do this are the most despicable people. They deserve life in prison, if not the death penalty, as we're about to show you in just a few minutes. He said that repeatedly about numerous cases. And obviously, you can just imagine that if John Bolton went on CNN or whatever network that has him, it's usually CNN, and he was there to talk about somebody who leaked classified information at a top secret level and that caused Iran to obtain it. Imagine the level of imprisonment, if not worse, that John Bolton would be demanding that such people receive.
Yeah, or if Qatar received it, or if Russia received it, or if China received it, he's always banging the drums of war and war propaganda against the CIA's latest boogeyman, always supporting those efforts, did so when it came to Syria, did so when it came to expanding the war in Yemen when he was in power in the first Trump administration. The guy's a vile neocon to the core, and he would demand the same kind of retribution that he demanded when it came to Snowden and Assange if that happened today. But no, if I'm going to leak this to my family through a group chat and all these classified, pages, no big deal. That's just for a future book. Nothing to see here. I shouldn't hang. I shouldn't hang at all. I'm doing what's best for the country. Ha ha ha. Let's support another war. That's what he says.
And yet now that John Bolton himself is being charged with the crimes that he has spent his entire life castigating other people in the most extreme ways, now that he's charged with exactly those crimes, do you think he's saying, I deserve life imprisonment, I'm a traitor, I should be hanged from an oak tree the way he did for other people who leaked, for much more benevolent purposes, not for compiling books and writing books to make them look good or for self-aggrandizement or for profit, but to inform the public? You think John Bolton is saying that? No, he's not. He's now whining that he's the victim. This is a statement that was given to his colleague, Caitlin Collins at CNN. She passed it along without even a hint of disagreement or noting what in the statement that is tenuous at best, if not false. This is part of what he said, quote, "For 4 decades, I have devoted my life to America's foreign policy and national security." He's actually devoted his life to demanding that other people go fight in wars so that he can feel strong and powerful. He's never gotten near a war, never fought in a war. He just wants to send other Americans to fight and die in as many as he can think of.
Yeah, that's exactly right. By national security, he means endless foreign wars, endless military occupations, endless regime change operations, which he boasted about helping to formulate, by the way. We'll take a look at that in a second. That's what they mean by national security.
And then he says, I would never compromise these goals. In 4 years of the prior administration, after 3 reviews, no charges were ever filed. Then came Trump 2, who embodies what Joseph Stalin's head of secret police once said. You show me the man and I'll show you the crime. So of course he's whining, he's the victim.
Yeah, that is what Barry has said, but it didn't start with Trump 2. It kind of started way before that, way beyond even my lifetime. Look at COINTELPRO in the 60s and them wiretapping without a warrant people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, and others. And for this to have begun in Trump, too, was insane, given that the Russiagate hoax played out in front of all of our eyes, where the deep state, and people say, well, that's Trump's FBI. Yeah, his deep state was trying to undermine him for treason, frame him for treason, and say he was collaborating with Putin, even when he was sending weapons to Russia, condemning Russian government for sheltering Snowden, withdrawing from the INF treaty, and slapping on sanctions. He was somehow buddies with Putin. They played this scam out on the American people so long, and that's when they went after Trump. And you're going to say this began now for someone that actually did commit offenses like Bolton, that did ruin people's lives, that did end up killing a lot of people? He's not indicted for the killing. He should be, but that's the truth.
But as even the New York Times says, it's very difficult to maintain that this is some kind of politicized witch hunt against a government critic, given that the Biden administration thought that this case was very serious. So did the intel agencies under Joe Biden. And this isn't a case where Donald Trump went to Truth Social and said, Pam, indict John Bolton the way he did with Jim Comey and Letitia James. This went through the normal standard DOJ process that everybody always feigns such respect for. Oh, the prosecutor brought it. It's a serious national security leak case.
No one's above the law, right? Remember, no one's above the law. You're not going to hear that very often from the liberal establishment because John Bolton is their ally. Why? Well, he doesn't see the same things as they do in terms of abortion or, things like that. But no, he supports all their wars. So he's just fine. We're not going to say no one's above the law to justify this. We're going to double down and defend him. That's what you're going to see.
In every other instance, that's what you would be hearing. Here, though, you're going to see the media rising in defense of John Bolton for no reason other than the fact that he is a critic of Donald Trump. And like I said, that is enough and nothing else, no matter what else is true about you, to get you into good standing inside Washington establishment, media, and politics circles. Needless to say, ground zero for defending John Bolton is found at that Blue Sky app, which is where all the liberals and leftists went once they realized that Twitter would no longer be a venue that would censor all their political enemies, and they went to that other place that's dying for that reason. But you go there, and they're all like, John Brennan is the victim of government prosecution. John Brennan, that's who they're defending.
Of course they are, just like they defended Liz Cheney. They didn't agree with Liz Cheney's views on abortion or kind of right-wing social preferences to the extent that she had them. They agreed with Liz Cheney and now agree with John Bolton because he supports the deep state and he supports all their wars. And he was a critic of Trump. He thought that Trump was a totalitarian. That's why they're trying to defend this guy, digging in their heels in such a pathetic way. That's exactly what's playing out.
Here's what John Brennan had to say in the past when other people were charged. I don't know why I keep saying John Brennan. I mean John Bolton. We're going to get John Brennan in a second. He's also been indicted. But here's what John Bolton had to say in other cases where people were charged with causing the leak of classified information. Here on December 18, 2013, I remember this actually. Former U.S. envoy, which is John Bolton, says Edward Snowden should be hanged as a traitor. Quote, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, has said whistleblower Edward Snowden should be hanged for treason. Quote, my view is that Snowden committed treason. He ought to be convicted of that. And then he went on Fox News right around the same time, and he was asked about Edward Snowden and people arguing that Snowden was a noble whistleblower, that unlike Bolton, who leaked classified information for profit or write a book for his own self-aggrandizement, Snowden did it simply because he wanted other people to know about the crimes the government was committing and how they were spying on Americans with no warrants. And unlike Bolton, who just sent it over reckless apps like AOL to his wife and daughter, Snowden used the most sophisticated encryption devices, demanded that the journalists whom he chose to work with, including myself, install and master these extreme multi-level encryption devices that he learned at the NSA and at the CIA to protect the sanctity of that information. To this date, nobody has ever suggested that Snowden's handling of that information enabled any other government or any other intelligence agency to hack it or to obtain it, unlike with what happened with John Bolton. John Bolton's case was way worse, both in terms of the motive, which is purely selfish and self-interested, but also Snowden, the only materials that saw the light of day that Edward Snowden took were materials that Not just the journalists, but the editors we work with around the world, newspapers, magazines deemed to be in the public interest. It went through huge amounts of multi-level vetting.
Yeah, this is really an interesting point. If you watch Citizen4 or the Snowden movie, they cover how, meticulous Snowden was about ensuring this information was highly encrypted, couldn't slip into the hands of other governments. But Bolton here is opening an AOL chat or Facebook chat, I can't remember which chat, to pass these classified documents through, man. And he's just going to get a pass from the liberal establishment, from the legacy media. This is exactly right. Snowden is a hero. He deserves medals for putting this out there. These transparent things that were crimes that the government was committed, that if any one of us committed them, clandestine military operations, seizing someone's persons, items, and effects, just shredding the Fourth Amendment, putting it through a shredder, we would be in jail. But Snowden's a hero because he divulged that to the public when the government wouldn't do that, and when the government was covering for its own crimes, including having Clapper lie about it under oath in Congress to Ron Wyden.
And he kept it all secure, whereas John Bolton just caused it to leak to Iran because he was so desperate to get his book deal done, where he could bash Trump and make money and rejuvenate or rehabilitate his reputation in the eyes of the CNNs and Caitlin Collins of the world. So here's what he said about Edward Snowden, infinitely his superior in terms of his actions, when he went on Fox News.
I think it's a big mistake. I have no idea. I mean, my view is that Snowden committed treason. He ought to be convicted of that, and then he ought to swing from a tall oak tree.
He ought to swing from a tall oak tree, said John Bolton about Edward Snowden. Now, Edward Snowden was never charged with treason. He was charged under the Espionage Act. Of course, he hasn't been prosecuted for it because he sought and obtained asylum in Russia. But John Bolton didn't just want Edward Snowden in prison. He wanted him murdered. He wanted him executed, to hang from an oak tree. Here's what John Bolton had to say about Julian Assange. Let me just say about Julian Assange. Unlike John Bolton, who, as a high-level government official, took an oath to protect classified information, to handle classified information only in accordance with the law, not to hand it to his wife or daughter, not to put it in books, not to send it over AOL apps. John Bolton actually had a legal and personal and ethical duty, an oath, to protect this classified information. Unlike John Bolton, Julian Assange wasn't even an American citizen. He didn't owe any duties to the American government, let alone work inside the U.S. government and swear any oath to maintain the sanctity of classified information. Julian Assange had no ethical duty, had no legal duty to maintain the sanctity of classified information. Julian Assange was somebody to whom was in the role of a journalist, somebody to whom sources inside the government leaked. Now, you can say people inside the government who leaked to him, they broke the law and they should have been punished, and people who are caught and accused of being the sources for WikiLeaks, like Chelsea Manning, were convicted and did spend many years in prison.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but that's not good enough for the U.S. ruling class, the U.S. regime, which believes that its jurisdiction extends to every corner of the earth, and then that should be policed and people's lives should be ruined for divulging U.S. war crimes. That's what Julian Assange did. He did it through intermediaries that gave him that information, but it did divulge U.S. war crimes, and that's why they wanted to put him away. That's why some think it was a bad decision to even come to a plea deal with him. And it's still not justice because he's a hero. He deserves medals for what he did, just like Snowden did. And I'm sorry to say, it doesn't really withstand scrutiny over Bolton's suggestion that what Snowden did was treason, even according to the U.S. Constitution, which says that treason shall consist only of levying war against them, meaning America's enemies, or the United States, I mean, or adhering to their enemies, giving them aid or comfort. It's something that Snowden certainly didn't do. He actually divulged, again, crimes of the U.S. government, not treason. The behavior of people like John Bolton is more consistent with treason, especially because Bolton supported the regime change effort in Syria. Guess what that had the U.S. siding with? Al-Qaeda and ISIS through Operation Timber Sycamore, when $15 billion poured into those groups to depose Assad. Israel wanted that. That's what Bolton supported. Bolton is far more guilty of treason than Snowden or Assange ever could be. And it's just so apparent.
That's the John Bolton role. Though again, Chelsea Manning leaked that information because she found evidence of grave war crimes. The U.S. gunning down journalists and civilians in Iraq, the video of it, huge amounts of documents on tens of thousands of unreported deaths that the United States oversaw in Afghanistan and Iraq, and so much more. She didn't make any money from it. She wasn't looking to write a book from it. She thought that this information, she was a private in the Army, something John Bolton never was, deployed to Iraq, volunteered to fight for her country, and she saw this information and she thought it was incredibly incriminating. The American people should know, and she sent it to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks published it. He wasn't on U.S. soil, Julian Assange. He was an American citizen, had no loyalty to the U.S. government, no oath to protect classified information the way John Bolton did. And here's what John Bolton said should happen to Julian Assange. This was John Bolton in 2023 when he went on Piers Morgan prison.
Well, I think that's a small amount of the sentence he actually deserves. He's committed clear criminal activity. He's no more a journalist than the chair I'm sitting on. The information that he divulged did, in fact, put many people in jeopardy. It undercut the ability of the United States to have confidential diplomatic communications, not just with other foreign governments, but in many countries with dissidents, people who, even speaking to American diplomats, could find themselves in trouble. And so, you know, he's been complaining about his treatment over the past period of time. He's the one who sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. Now he faces extradition to the United States. I presume he will get due process in the United Kingdom to determine whether extradition should go forward. And when he gets to the United States, he'll get due process here. And I hope he gets at least 176 years in jail for what he did.
All right, so that was, unlike Edward Snowden, whom he wanted to see hanged from a tree, an oak tree specifically. And look at what a twisted, warped mind John Bolton has. He was envisioning Edward Snowden being hanged so continuously, so intensively, that he even conjured up the kind of tree by which he wanted him hanged. And in the case of Julian Assange, he said he should be in prison for 176 years. Even though, again, John Bolton's case is much worse. That's why I say this is the sweetest karmic justice. You can't imagine anything better happening to a person more deserving than this.
Yeah, I got to agree with them there. Both Snowden and Julian Assange are, again, heroes deserving of full pardons and medals for their great service to the American people, for divulging how our government shreds the Fourth Amendment, you know, continues endless wars throughout the globe, plunges us into debt to do that, exacerbates inflation to do that, how the surveillance state has expanded beyond the desires of the American public for that. And John Bolton's a supervillain. And in fact, he's so revolting, there are a few people that are more revolting than him in the swamp. And, you know, a lot of the Trump supporters, you know, made a lot of excuses for that by Trump appointing him in this first term. Hey, it's keeping him close. It's so he's not far away and can kind of work to undermine this government. He's close to Trump. Well, I'm sorry. He made a lot of operational decisions that expanded the warfare state in Trump's first term that were disastrous, especially in Syria and in Yemen. He wanted to assassinate Julian Assange. You know, he was part of that administration under Pompeo that tried to launch an effort to kidnap and assassinate Julian Assange. And look at what he said here. What does it take to brazenly boast about war crimes? You know, John Bolton makes no bones about it. Let's just watch this. This was from, I believe, Trump's first term.
Not an attack on our democracy. It's Donald Trump looking out for Donald Trump. It's a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence.
I don't know that I agree with you. To be fair, with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but, you know, other places, it takes a lot of work. And that's not what he did. It was just stumbling around from one idea to another. Ultimately, he did unleash the rioters at the Capitol. As to that, there's no doubt. But
of course he did. It's so absurd. And he boasts openly about supporting coup d'etat. And this was during Biden's presidency, by the way. This is after he was out of office. but he boasted about planning coup d'etat. And notice how the mass slip, he immediately said, not here, but at other places. Well, yeah, he was complicit with Russiagate. He was using lies to justify that at the same time as pushing that insurrection narrative at the Capitol, where we know that hundreds of federal informants and agitators were there, and we know that Capitol Hill police just let those people in. We know people like Ray Epps, said people should run into the Capitol. This is just so reprehensible and vile. Glenn is so right. This is karmic justice that finally one of these swamp creatures like Bolton might have to face the wrath of actual crimes, not these specious Russiagate crimes that they tried to frame Trump with. And I have no love for Trump. You guys know that. I blasted him in this video. Not for the same reasons Bolton does. Bolton would never blast Trump for being a war criminal, because he's a war criminal too. He agreed with those, policies that Trump unfurled, but he did latch on to the liberal establishment and the conservative establishment's view in terms of Russiagate, in terms of the neocon effort to empire build throughout the war, get into all sorts of military operations. Looks like he's only indicted for mishandling classified information, creating a group chat with his family where he passed through, these classified documents, and the feds say Iran got a hold of it. Now, I'm always skeptical when the feds say that, of course, because they want antagonism toward Iran at this point. But if anything, John Bolton should go down for his war crimes. Like Glenn said, this would be a relatively minor offense, but the hypocrisy here is so glaring when it comes to Bolton, who again said Snowden should hang, Julian Assange should have 176 years in jail, and he was particularly harsh on his former boss, Trump, for mishandling classified information too. So that's what you get out of this vermin swamp creature that is John Bolton. It is karmic justice. Glenn Greenwald is right. But I do want to hear from you. What do you think? Let me know down below. Is John Bolton a supervillain? Is he going to go down for this? Is he going to get to a plea deal and this be like a sweetheart deal for him? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Glenn Greenwald. Really appreciate his show. Thanks, Glenn, for this segment. It was amazing. And if you like this video and my commentary, please consider becoming a YouTube member of mine. If you click the join button below, you can help support this channel. I will graciously appreciate that if you do. And in return for that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.